Hello, everybody. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. And a huge thank you to Be the Ones for organizing such an amazing day of content for us. Before we jump in, just a quick reminder that Vote Local Day is a nonpartisan event, and this session is being recorded, but attendees are not on camera. My name is Charley Olena. I'm the Senior Director of Advocacy for Secure Democracy USA. Secure Democracy is a national, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that works to build confidence in our elections and improve voter access across the United States. We work to educate policymakers and the public about what it takes to safeguard our voting systems. And we collaborate with state leaders, elections administrators, policy experts, and allies to ensure all eligible citizens have the freedom to vote how they choose. I am so excited to be hosting this panel for Vote Local Day because I see how critical civic education is every single day in our work. Through our research and state advocacy, we find a consistent demand from voters of every party and political persuasion when it comes to our elections, a desire for transparency, to better understand how our elections work and what goes on behind the scenes. So it is my great honor to be hosting this panel to shine a spotlight on the champions who make our democracy work and some of the creative and innovative things they're doing to promote civic education, build confidence in our elections, and ensure voters can be heard this year. We have an amazing panel for you today, featuring democracy champions from across the country. First, I would like to introduce New Hampshire Secretary of State, David Scanlan. Secretary Scanlan has been in office since January of this year, and he served as Deputy Secretary of State for 20 years prior to 2022, and also served 8 terms in the state legislature between 1984 and 2002. So he's seen a thing or two when it comes to our elections. Next, we have County Clerk for Boone County, Missouri, Brianna Lennon. Brianna Lennon is a graduate of Truman State University and holds a master's in public policy and a law degree, both from the University of Missouri. Prior to her election as Boone County Clerk, Brianna served as Assistant Attorney General in the Consumer Protection Division of the Missouri Attorney General's Office before joining the Missouri Secretary of State's office as the Deputy Director of Elections and Elections Counsel. She serves as secretary for the Missouri Association of County Clerks and Election Authorities. And in her spare time, Brianna co-hosts an elections administration podcast called High Turnout, Wide Elections, and I can highly recommend it. And finally, we have Connecticut Secretary of State Staff Attorney Aida Carini. Aida is an attorney in the Legislative and Elections Administration Division of the Connecticut Office of the Secretary of State. She lives with her feline partner in crime, Harlan, and spends weekends volunteering for America's vet dogs, raising and training service puppies. A huge thank you and welcome to all of our panelists. So let's go ahead and jump in here. And Secretary Scanlan, I'd love to start with you first. So secretaries of state play a really important role in running our states, but the position isn't necessarily well understood by a lot of people. So how would you describe the job of the Secretary of State?
Well, good afternoon, Charlie, and thanks for hosting this segment. I saw some of the early segments and they're fascinating to listen to. But the role of Secretary of State is in large part ministerial. There are a lot of functions in state government that are mundane and need to be taken care of. One of those is just simply keeping the records that state government generates. And in the case of New Hampshire, we have a state archives, which is under the Secretary of State's office. And we keep some of our most precious historical documents there, some of them dating back to the mid-1600s, because New Hampshire was one of the original colonies. One of the divisions that we have is the Corporations Division, where we register corporations and LLCs and other types of business entities that operate within the state of New Hampshire. We make sure that they keep their filings up to date, and that's an important role. We do things like issue notary public commissions and justice of the peace commissions. We have a division of vital records. I think we're probably the only one of the 50 states to keep track of births, deaths, marriages, divorces in the Secretary of State's office. That's a function most commonly in a division of Health and Human Services in other states. But probably the most important function that we undertake and manage and supervise is elections. And I think most secretaries of state in the country, not all, but most, are the chief election official within the state, and they have the responsibility of conducting fair and accurate elections and making sure that the voters in those states have an easy opportunity to exercise that important right to vote.
That's great. Thank you so much. So clearly secretaries of state cover, that role can cover kind of a wide variety of responsibilities. Aida, I'd love to hear from you. What's something that the Secretary of State is responsible for in Connecticut that folks might not expect?
Sure. Hi, Charlie. Hi, Brianna. My name is actually Aida. No worries. I'm very used to it. So in Connecticut, the Office of the Secretary of the State does undertake all of the roles except for, as Secretary Scanlan pointed out, we do not host the vital records. The town clerks actually host the vital records in the state of Connecticut. One of the items that most people would never think that the Secretary of the State in Connecticut is involved in is criminal extradition orders. So the Secretary of the State's office has to sign off on the extradition orders and interface with the marshals in order to transport individuals into or out of the state of Connecticut within police custody or Department of Correction custody. The other very unique thing that is buried within the statutes that people would not think that the Secretary of the State's office handles is that all of the militias within the state of Connecticut are required on an annual basis to file a list of their armaments and supplies with the Secretary of the State's office. So that was an interesting document to come across and wonder, why is this coming to me? Do I care that you've got 4 bulletproof vests and 6 muskets? Like what? And it turns out that, if they don't do that, they get fined.
Definitely did not expect that to be a part of your answer. Thank you so much for that. Brianna, similarly, county clerks are critical folks in local government. And while the role has definitely become more visible in recent years, it may still not be the first elected position that comes to voters' minds. How would you describe the job of a county clerk?
I usually describe it as a catch-all of local government. So it varies a lot from state to state, but generally what the role of a county clerk or a county recorder or a town clerk or a city clerk is to do the administrative functions of local government, but also to be the one that maintains most of the records for things. So obviously there's the election side of things that is really important, that there's between 8,000 and 10,000 local election administrators. Their titles vary greatly, and so do their job descriptions, but they almost always include some other area of either budgetary control or maintenance of vital records or business licenses, dog tag licenses. Sometimes it really varies and it's very localized, but it was often one of the first local roles defined when a county was established or a municipality was established, just so that they could keep rolls of things and records of things. So it's very much a position that when new things pass in laws, they often get sent to the county clerk's office to figure out how to implement, because we have a I would say our job description is incredibly broad and sometimes pretty deep, but mostly just incredibly broad. Lots of times we end up being just kind of the go-betweens between state offices and even smaller local offices sometimes. Tax rates are a good example of that. Lots of times we're in charge of tax rates. We don't actually collect the taxes, and we don't set the tax rates for the local entities, but we have to hold the tax rates and we have to extend the tax rolls. It's really a position that is held in high regard in the scheme of things, because the reason why we have that is because we're the accountability check. We're the trustworthy office that maintains those important features and just tries to keep the ball of local government rolling.
That's great. Thank you so much. Secretary Scanlan, as you mentioned, secretaries of state play really big roles in shaping and facilitating our elections. Could you tell us a little bit about an improvement that you brought to elections in New Hampshire that you are particularly proud of?
Well, we have a really polarized political climate right now, and I think that's true in just about every state in the country. Some more so than others, and New Hampshire certainly is one of those states that is a purple state, and so there's a lot of debate and discussion in the legislature about how the laws should play out, especially as they relate to elections. One thing that I have noticed over the last few years in the roles that I've played related to elections is that there is a lack of civic education taking place in our education system today. That, I think that's true in New Hampshire and it may be true nationwide, but there is a growing lack of understanding, I think, among our voters on just really how the election process works. And elections should be completely transparent. I know in New Hampshire, a voter or anybody can go into a polling place and observe the process of voting start to finish. They can watch as voters check in at the check-in station, announce their name, receive their ballot, go to the voting booth, and obviously the act of voting is secret. But then the voter can travel to either the ballot box in those communities that still hand count their ballots, or place their ballot in a ballot counting device. And once the polls close at the end of the night, the results are tabulated and announced in the polling place so that the voter has an opportunity to see that. What voters don't realize in many cases is that there are many checks and balances that are built into that process. The political parties have a role. There are appointments that are made by the political parties that are actually participating in the checking in of voters and handing ballots on the day. There are official challengers that can step forward and challenge the qualifications of any voter based on a valid reason. And so one of the things that I've worked on since I became Secretary of State in January is to just heighten that awareness, do a better job of educating voters. We're doing that by, I hired a communications director for the first time in the office. We've had a much heavier presence on social media. We've implemented a program known as Election Fun Facts, and we're cycling those out on a daily basis to try and help voters understand at any given time what is happening in the voting process. New Hampshire does not have enough of a population of voters that don't speak English as a first language to be required to provide voting materials in foreign languages, but it's growing enough, and we see our diversity within the state growing enough that for the first time we have provided voting information in 3 different languages: Spanish, French, and Mandarin Chinese, which, according to census information, are the most commonly spoken languages other than English in the state. And in addition to that, we've taken that even beyond elections and we're promoting an investor education guide in English and in Spanish. But there have been benefits to doing that I didn't expect, and that is because we are taking the initiative to provide those materials and information. We are now having those communities reach out to us and ask if we can come and visit them and speak to them and help educate them. And we've generated a really neat dialogue that I hope we can build upon moving forward to just better engage those communities. And it's just not communities that don't speak English as a first language, similar issues with the disabilities community, and different ways that we can reach out to them to give them a better experience in terms of voting, making it easy for them, and extending that to the general voting population as a whole.
That's great, and I think so powerful to be able to bring those kinds of improvements to access to elections. So thank you so much for that work. That's really exciting. In addition to how kind of polarized the issue of elections has become, I think we've also seen an increase in the spread of election-related mis- and disinformation online, particularly over the past 2 years. Aida, I would love to hear from you kind of what challenges have you seen that create for the Secretary of State's office in Connecticut, and how have you worked to address it?
Sure thing, Charlie. So first and foremost, we have seen an uptick, obviously, in election disinformation and misinformation. Now, one of the first things that we had to do within our office was to determine what level of scrutiny we would apply to determine what would be considered misinformation or disinformation. We have chosen to focus on misrepresentations of actual election law. Anything that would result in interfering with individuals being able to register to vote, to exercise their right to vote on the day of a primary or an election, and the laws surrounding absentee ballots. So things that we were concerned with were accounts that would give incorrect hours of polling location times, incorrect polling locations, and incorrect information as to how to register to vote, where to register to vote, and how to obtain absentee ballots, who is eligible for absentee ballots, where to return those. And in order to address this, after coming up with the policy, our office actually sought to hire a IT analyst who serves as a security analyst. Their job is to comb social media and to find, under certain filters, things that might rise to the level of what is considered misinformation or disinformation. And then counsel in the office reviews that and decides what to do next. Now, with the polarization, there is a very fine line with what is considered a valid question or a political opinion versus disinformation. So we wanted to be very careful to ensure that we were not in any way, shape, or form limiting individuals' rights to ask questions or to challenge or to express, their distrust or their displeasure with candidates. And so our job really has been just to ensure that our education efforts reach as many people as possible, showing the day of the primary, showing the day of the election, showing the reasons why one is eligible to vote absentee. Because Connecticut is in a unique position with absentee voting. We are one of only 4 states that does not have any form of early voting, and we have very, very strict absentee voting laws in terms of eligibility. So that has been the majority of our focus, is just ensuring that the electorate has the information that they need in order to exercise their right to vote.
Thank you so much. And Brianna, what about at the county level? And what recommendations do you have for folks who are trying to get accurate information about their local elections?
So local election authorities, I think, our biggest challenge has been that we really just don't have a loud enough voice to be able to get through all of the noise of campaigns and everything else that's happening to be able to educate people. And we're not a particularly well-known office. So there's a lot of local election authorities that have been trying to build up their social media presence, trying to get the word out about things. And surveys continue to say that local election authorities are the most trusted source of information, that voters do trust their local election authorities. And even when they're saying things like they believe that the election was stolen, they still think that their local election authority had everything right and conducted a good election. They're casting aspersions on other people. So, you know, logically that should mean that we should be able to get the word out and be able to talk to people, but it's just incredibly difficult to break through the noise. So a lot of the time that I spend trying to educate voters is just trying to direct them to our office in the first place. It's not always easy to remember that the county clerk's office is the one running elections. We're not the elections division. I mean, it would make sense if that's what we could call ourselves, but we can't. So there's a lot of continuing voter education, especially for those of us. My voting population is largely college students. My jurisdiction has the University of Missouri, and so we're constantly changing out voters. We have a transient population. There's always new people that need to have the right information, and because everything is done at a local level, there's differing ways to do things. So there may be voters that come in from another state that are used to being able to have early voting or having certain things, that then it becomes, they get doubt in their mind when they hear that things don't work the same way here. So the only thing that I would say that helps us is to amplify our messages. It's great when there's people that want to put out good information and want to get that out there. If it can be sourced back to us as a reference or shared directly from our social media or attributed to us, that to me is the best way to be able to get out the good information, but also create a sustainable way to direct people back to our office as the source of information.
Thank you so much for that. So as we've established, I think there's some work to do to educate folks, but also to help rebuild public confidence in our election systems. Secretary Scanlan, what kind of steps has your office taken to try to rebuild that confidence?
Well, there's a number of things. One is the education component. Just help voters understand how the process works and that there are no secrets and it's transparent. And we've actually shown them how they can look to find the information that they might be looking for after an election to just verify that the results were accurately reported. I took the initiative last spring to create a special committee on voter confidence. And I chose a panel of 8 individuals balanced by party affiliation and background. I purposely chose not to have any sitting legislators or elected local election officials on the committee, but just individuals that had really good backgrounds for listening, number one, and being able to take the information that they heard to try and identify why there's this sentiment out there that, you know, maybe our elections aren't accurate, and make recommendations on how we can just improve that situation moving forward. And the committee is wrapping up its work now. They haven't issued a report. I expect that there will be coming, and it will probably come out sometime around the midterm election. But I found the exercise to be tremendously helpful, just from my own perspective, because we had individuals coming in for the public hearings and just testifying the diverse viewpoints that they have, why they think that way, and by doing that, we actually found that there's some common ground that between two disparate sides that we may be able to build on in the future. And obviously, changes in our election process are determined by the legislature, and the legislature changes from year to year depending on which party's in power and who makes it up. And so there's always a tug of war trying to find that balance of making our system work really well. But I think that there are going to be some good recommendations that the special committee on voter confidence will have that can be taken up and addressed by the legislature. And hopefully we can formulate good public policy moving forward that will give all voters confidence in the process.
That's great. Well, we'll definitely look forward to the report and keep an eye out for it and for what's next in New Hampshire. Brianna, same question for you. What steps have you taken at the county level to help build confidence and public understanding of our elections?
So one of the nice things about local election administration is that we're doing the nuts and bolts of things. And so we're able to kind of invite people behind the scenes. And the process itself is transparent anyway, but very few people are aware of that. What we often find is anyone that has a critique or a question isn't fully aware of the fact that they can just come into the office and ask questions. And so we've been inviting people in, giving people tours, and then during the election administration portion of it, we do pretty robust logic and accuracy testing of every voting equipment, which just means it's a fancy word for running a test deck of ballots through every machine that we're going to use. And people can come and watch that. And so those kinds of things, offering that, trying to make sure that people are aware that this office is just as much theirs as it is, the people working in it. So people can come in and ask questions, watch the counting happen, be part of the process, bring people in as poll workers. That's absolutely the number one thing when people ask about questions about how the elections work. We invite them to be poll workers because we're always in need of more poll workers. And, people that have doubts about the election get to be a part of the process. It makes it very hard to criticize something when you're the one actually making it happen. So those are the types of ways that we can get people involved and hopefully push back on some of that narrative.
That's great. Thank you so much. So Aida, I'm curious, what do you see as the biggest needs and priorities for elections in Connecticut? And where do you hope our elections go from here?
Well, Charlie, as we all may know, those of us in government, technology seems to move a lot faster than budget approvals do. So right now, Connecticut is looking to modernize. We are in need of new tabulators. I think our tabulators were something like 20 years old. There's been a lot of allegations over, hacking. Well, our tabulators can't connect to the internet. So that wasn't something that we were facing as an issue in this election nonsense. So on top of that, we're also looking to modernize our voter registration database and election management software. We put out a request for proposals, and we've recently settled on a vendor, and we hope to complete that renewal process in anticipation of the 2024 election. We're hoping for the 2023, but sometimes those rollouts take a lot longer than you anticipate. So that is what our main focus is on right now. Where we would like to see elections in Connecticut go is, as I had previously mentioned, we do not have any form of early voting, and we have fairly restrictive absentee voting laws. On November's ballot, Connecticut does have a constitutional question posed to the voters that would allow the legislature to begin establishing and discussing a framework to allow for early voting. Connecticut's constitution currently prohibits early voting. And so that is the reasoning for why we have a constitutional question on the ballot, in case anybody was curious for that. So frankly, that's what I would like to see. You know, I think that COVID really presented a situation where people didn't want to have to physically appear in the polls. And I think that individuals that were disabled and immunocompromised and working long hours really were happy to have a greater ease in exercising their constitutional right to elect their representatives. It is my hope, and I think the administration's hope, that this constitutional question goes in our direction and allows us to begin establishing some framework for early voting and opening the availability of absentee voting to many of those that would otherwise be unable to exercise that method of voting, and really bring out the folks.
Thank you so much for that. Would love to see those improvements come to Connecticut. And then Brianna, what about at the county level? What are the biggest needs that you see at the county level in Missouri?
I did change cameras, sorry. So the biggest needs are obviously resources. I mean, I think that that's a common thing across every local election authority, especially because most of us are funded at the local level. There's really not a lot of state or federal consistent funding that happens. And because of that, it makes it very difficult to create consistent plans or budgeting processes that last for more than one election cycle. So when we have these huge changes or want to create huge changes, we don't necessarily have a steady stream of resources to make it happen as much as we would like to. And so we're trying to do a lot with very little. And then I think the other challenge is that we're seeing a lot of change in laws, good, bad, and indifferent, that are tricky to implement at the same time that we're seeing a huge number of local election authorities turn over. So we're bringing new election officials into the field, which is good and bad. It's good to have new blood. It's bad because we're losing a lot of institutional knowledge, and we're asking these individuals to immediately make these sweeping changes when they have no experience working in elections. And so we absolutely need some people to run for these positions and get involved in local election administration that have a vested interest in doing the work and not just talking about talking points and trying to, sow doubt or things like that, because we are primarily a bureaucratic institution. I mean, local election authorities are not out there able to influence policy as much as we would like to. So we need to make sure that we have people that are engaged and invested and able to make the changes that we need to make to expand voting and to make the process good for voters.
Thank you so much. I think those are great points. So we're going to move into our last question here, which is for everybody on our panel. But would like to start with you, Secretary Scanlan, and hear what are one or two action steps that folks on this call could take to help support their local elections.
Well, it would be great if voters would participate as a poll worker at least once. Just it's the people that I know that do it find it to be an incredibly rewarding experience. And sometimes it just it's enough of a catalyst to get them to do it for the long term. And it really is providing a great public service, and it helps make our elections run smoothly. New Hampshire conducts many recounts after an election is over because we have such a large House of Representatives. We conduct probably more recounts by far than any other state in the country, especially after a general election. And it's amazing the citizens that ask if they can help participate in a recount. And and then listen to their reaction afterwards, it really does give them faith in the process. So, if people are concerned about how the election process is working, if they have their own doubts, step forward and ask if you can actually become engaged in the process and see firsthand how it works. And then the other more important thing is for all voters, exercise your right to vote. Really, I think it's easy in most states, whether you have all mail voting or early voting or you don't. In New Hampshire, we're like Connecticut, where you have to have an excuse to vote by absentee, and we have polling places in every community. But the polls that come out from our UNH, University of New Hampshire polling center, show that 98% of the voters that go out to vote, whether it's by absentee or at the polling place, find the process easy. So don't be intimidated by the process. Just get out there and exercise that right to vote, because it's really important, and it would be great to have 100% turnout.
I also would love to see 100% turnout. I think we can get there eventually. Aida, what would you say?
Well, I think you're going to have every single one of us say that we would like more poll workers. Truly, we are in need of that. But just on top of getting engaged, we do have an aging populace of actual municipal workers involved in elections. Connecticut is unique in that in Connecticut, we do not have a county system. We have 169 municipalities that elect their own registrars of voters who then conduct the elections on the local level. And we do have an aging populace of both town clerks and registrars of voters across the state. So to the extent that panelists and participants know individuals in Connecticut who have an interest in getting involved, we would love to see people running for some of these positions and, getting into the system, learning and participating, because we are not eternal.
Great. And Brianna, let's close it out with you. What advice or action steps would you recommend for folks?
So, the only other thing that I would add, because I think that they've both covered it completely, is that we need more poll workers and we need more people entering the field. We also need voters to look up and connect with their local election authority. I think I was listening to both of the other panels that came before us, and there was a lot of conversation about the importance of implementation. Even if you get a good law passed, the implementation makes or breaks whether it has a good impact or not. And personally, that's one of the reasons I entered this field, because that's the part of the elections process that I love. But I also encourage people to reach out to their local election authorities, find out who it is that runs their elections in their community, and create a conversation with them. If you are a activist or you're working in an advocacy world and you want to know how your elections are run, or if the things that you are doing are actually trickling down to the local election authority office, have those conversations. We get letters every day from political parties and sometimes attorneys and things like that ask us to do certain things that we're already doing. And it's great because we're already doing it. And so I can write back to them and say, oh, thanks for letting me know that this is important to you. We already do X, Y, and Z. But that's not true in every case. And it's good to have a conversation with local election authorities individually, because we know when we get form letters. I know when I get a letter that says, can you do these things, that they haven't actually looked into whether I'm doing them yet or not. So I know that every local election authority has a different personality, and it's not always that willing to engage, but that's going to be the best way to make an impact in your local community on local elections.
That's great. Thank you so much. Okay, so those are the questions that we had prepared for our panelists. Please, if you've got any questions for our panelists, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We've got one already, which is that there are so many changes to our state laws around voting. What are some places I can go to find information and keep up to date? I'm going to exercise a little facilitator privilege here and answer this one, take this one for myself. I want to recommend a resource by a research partner of ours called the Voting Rights Lab. They maintain a tracker that tracks what election-related policy is moving in all 50 states. In addition to proposed bills or proposed changes that tracker tracks, they also have great resources and information about what existing practices and laws are in your state. So if you are not sure when the deadline is to register to vote, or whether you can vote by absentee ballot in your state, you can check out the Voting Rights Lab's tracker to find all sorts of information about the existing voting laws in your state, and then see what changes have been proposed. You can see what changes folks think should come to elections in your state, and that is a great resource to see what's going on and have an opportunity to weigh in on any of those bills or changes if you think you know, that you should support them one way or the other. That resource, which Kate, I think, put in the chat for everybody, you can find at votingrightslab.org. And I keep their tracker bookmarked. I use it all the time in my work. And so that's a great resource for you as well. And as well as Brianna mentioned, the National Council on State Legislatures also tracks a lot of this information for folks also. We'll give folks one more minute just to see if we have any other questions. I'm not seeing too many, so I think I can hand it back over to you, Kate, and a huge thank you to our panelists and to Kate and Be the Ones for hosting us today. Thank you so much for all of the work that you are doing to run great elections in our communities. Really appreciate it, and thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Well, hang on one second. There wasn't a question. I just wanted to acknowledge a comment from Jen, I believe. Jen, thank you. She says, no question, just wanted to say thank you to these champions. We so appreciate all that you do to protect our democracy and our right to vote. Thank you, thank you, thank you, in all caps too. And I want to end on a note as appreciation to you, all of you, for joining us today and sharing your voice and information and knowledge and time on a Saturday with us, but also echo what Jen and Charlie said in thank you for protecting our right to vote, for championing safe, secure elections, and all of your work that you are not only doing in your state, but across the country, the model that you're setting for us. So thank you so much for being with us, and thank you for your work. And we look forward to continuing to lift up what you're doing and continuing to build a stronger democracy together. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
No, thank you.